Let's see, I'll tell you when.
Okay.
All right, I think we're live now.
Excellent. Excellent.
So, hi everyone. This is Julia and James here, and we're recording this on October 4th, 2022. And James always has many pearls of wisdom. So, what's new, James?
I've had what is, well, I call it equinox balancing. Other people will call it a cold. I've not done anything about it apart from a few spoonfuls of honey. It sort of left me feeling exhausted, and I thought, right, okay, I'm going to listen to the body. There's nothing that's particularly urgent, so I can just rest. And it's phenomenal. I noticed it yesterday with Adrian Elise on her Gaia Daily, and I'm not the only person that's noticed it by the look of things. Not only can you see this blue of her aura, I've seen as she's talking, and I need to go back and watch it again as to what she's talking about when it happens. It's like a searchlight of energy in this blue color, but then later on in the video, I'm starting to see her aura and the colors all in a nice order as well. And then a video call last night, same thing, different, seeing something not exactly the same, but and actually talking to the same person again this morning. They raised their hands up, and then as they pulled their fingers away, they saw it as well on the screen, this like spark and like this white arc. It's incredible. So what I'm suggesting from this, and I'm hoping there's going to be many people that actually notice this, because you could say with videos, oh, it's sunlight and it's the stability of the signal, but this is something else for definite. And I feel that we're moving things in nature and in the natural start in darkness. So a seed will begin to grow below ground. I feel that since this equinox, there's a huge upsurge in solar flares, that this is some sort of spiritual upgrade that is taking place. It feels right to me. I'm also seeing that whatever there is in architecture has a basis in human physiology. So when Jason of Archaic's channel talks about a countdown sequence encoded in the Great Pyramid of Giza, I feel this is why you have what is collectively known as this Great Awakening, and some people seem to see things in a new way and question things in a new way after an event with planes and towers, shall we say. And then this recent events in the last 2 years has now brought in further people that have begun to question this reality, what it actually is, and obviously the age-old question of who am I and what is my purpose, that I think everybody at some degree asks. It seems that sadly that a lot give up asking that question. But I feel that we're opening up to a broader frequency range, the real broadband, you could say. So we've got some sort of countdown sequence in maybe our dormant DNA. It's just waiting for the right, it's called spiritual download. And I can't help but think with a mobile phone that you've got a set of circuits inside, and they are, all they need is to download an app to do something different, but the circuits inside the phone are still the same. So I can see in architecture and devices that they are based on us. So that leads me also to another thing I was pondering, in that, what if we have there was fragmented knowledge, and this word simulation seems to trigger a lot of people. I feel that we are in some sort of living biocomputer. Certainly these human bodies seem to be electrical circuits and things, but I can't deny the spirit either. And I feel a lot of this is the limitations of the language. I have no problem personally with seeing it as a biocomputer, and it also leads on further with this. I don't know how you feel about any of this, Julia.
Yeah, it's like anybody that has the ability to wake up and to just be able to download these new apps that you're talking about is getting the opportunity. You know, in the recent times, the past 2 years, you know, it's just, if you're gonna wake up, you've woken up. You know, if you're not an NPC or a Walking Dead, you're awake at this point. And there were a lot of people who weren't awake, who were capable of getting to that resonance. And yeah, it's all about your frequency being able to pick up these new adaptations that are coming in for us. And I think, yeah, the more of us that kind of resonate with it, it does have that collective effect. And I don't necessarily know if we can change everything, but we can definitely change our immediate surroundings, and even a little more than that.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. Picture one of these sort of Egyptian deities, the sort of classic image, and you've got the sun disk on top of their head, and it's basically surrounded by like two sort of pincers or two horns, basically showing like 101. Now, if you look at the chakra system and the way that Santos Bonacci explains it, that it's the petals of each chakra come up to between 1 and 6, the third eye equal 144. Then with that crown chakra, it is multiplied by 1,000. So I feel what they're showing in those Egyptian depictions with that massive sort of disc on their heads is that 7th chakra. And I've been experimenting with this, and I've been thinking about this, and I had sort of like cellular memory, doing moon ceremonies where I've written things on pieces of paper, intentions, and letting go of things, and you put them in the fire, and then it goes out into the cosmos, as it were, in a sort of smoke form. You can also transmute by earthing and going barefoot on the ground and giving things to earth, so that you've got a two-way process there. Now, what if you build upon that crown chakra and you turned it basically into a transformer, a metaphoric transformer, and just like a electrical transformer, you have coils on one side and coils on the other, and depending on how many coils on each side will increase the output side with a very small input. So you could see this as like an interaction from intention between the micro and the macro. So I feel that we do have an equal power, a phenomenal power, that we can bounce back frequencies. It's all about reflecting out into the world. The world is a reflection of us. So what about in the energetic sense of what we reflect out, and what our intentions are, and what we can sort of push out towards the astrology side, towards the stars, as it were, because it seems clear that they have electromagnetic influences. Maybe they're working on protocols and things. Again, it's terminology is the problem with all of this. So what if we can do it with two-way traffic, and we can start broadcasting by radiating out and magnifying it, and it sort of has a greater impact on the macro.
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally possible, and that's probably exactly what the crown chakra is for.
Well, I'm also looking at this whole thing about letting go. Now you've got the material side of this, letting go of things. What if we are playing out a spiritual story? I'm going to call it God, and we are created in the image of God. So what if God also has to let go of certain things? So what would be called NPCs, people that have firewalled themselves off and gone down that material route, maybe this God will let go of them. It's referenced in, I think it's the Book of Thomas, where it says, he who blasphemes against the Father will be forgiven. He who blasphemes against the Son will be forgiven, but he who blasphemes against the Spirit will find no place in heaven on earth. Because clearly the avatar side will be recycled back into Mother Earth anyway. But what of the spirit, the unseen, the bit beyond gas, as it were, beyond the air, when we move into the totally spiritual? Maybe it's the same process, and it's being played out on a sort of micro level of it, but a macro level to us. Just a thought.
Yeah, but isn't the spirit what continues? And then yesterday, you know, how Paul was talking about what the flock, about how he sees that the aura is kind of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And that you can really use it to you can use your informed field or your auric field to just decide how time passes for your avatar. Interesting.
Well, in the film The Matrix, the central character, there's one scene where he wakes up and he's in this sort of egg-shaped cocoon with these hose pipes all the way down his spine. I'd have to see the scene again, but I should imagine 12. Well, we're dealing with a spiritual. So what if that egg actually represents your informed field, your toroidal field, your aura? And what if you can build it up to such a level of spiritual protection that it's like an ostrich egg? It's a very hard shell and very hard to break. In fact, I'd probably even go as far as to say what would be, people would say it's a dinosaur egg. It would be that sort of strong that basically creates a spiritual umbrella that nothing can penetrate. And I feel that it's an extension of when you can get yourself to such a state that you can convince yourself internally and deny the outside world and thought, and then the thoughts manifest into the physical reality. What I don't see any difference. That I feel that we are well and truly have the capabilities and the power within us to actually do this to our aura, to our individual domes, as it were, and nothing can harm us. So we do become, on that, I think it's the film That Guy. That's the one to be that guy, the one that's carrying that laptop under one arm, the coffee cup in the other hand, and he's got a great big smile, and all behind him is like an apocalyptic scene of fireballs and destruction, and he's not affected by it at all. And I feel that is a huge symbol being shown to us, an image being shown to us that speaks more than the words, than if it was to be put into words. I mean, look how long it's taken me to explain it, but that image just shows it in an instant if you choose to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all totally capable of that. And it just doesn't do any good to focus on all the stuff that's going on out there that you can't change anyway. There's nothing that you can do to affect it. But you can build such a shield around you that you're not affected by any of it. And you can just create whatever you want, literally.
Yeah, I've seen it on a meme. It's one of the, it's a famous sort of, it might be a Hopi chief, and it says depends which wolf you feed, the negative one or the positive one. Neville Goddard talks about this, of seeing this sort of apparition of this absolutely beautiful woman, and she's got this son that's this hideous monster, and the more he sort of punches it and feeds it, it grows. It loves the negative energy and it just keeps growing. But if he doesn't give it any attention, it stops feeding it and it just shrivels away and dissolves. I mean, we're all good at, and we've all been programmed to worry about things, and therefore that is giving attention to the negative things, the very things we don't want to draw towards us, which we ultimately do by doing that. So by letting go, because it's another letting go, it's letting go of the negatives, the things that give you less pleasant feelings that you feel in the physical body, which can then go on to be illness and a dis-ease, because you've dis-eased yourself. You've created an acidic environment in the body through stress and worry. But by not feeding that and then changing the focus, and I feel it does have a, especially if we can transform and we can magnify and increase our output by transforming. And this reality, I feel, is an experience to try and transform and restore it back to a more of a natural order rather than a new order of chaos. Because nature has continuous change anyway, but it is, it's a natural cycle that really it should be far more, less extreme of winter and summer, and more meandering between spring and fall in a continuous cycle, but very gentle waves. And you've still got the continuous change, but in a far better, far more natural way.
Right, less harsh.
Yeah.
And it's really cool too, like that one video that we were looking at the other day with the Japanese guy using the simulation theory metaphor for our existence, and how he talked about how all these supernatural abilities, support that we're in a computer, basically, in the platonic computer, as he
Yeah, I like
calls
that.
it. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, and he talks about how, it's just about conceiving. If you can conceive, then you have power. But I like how those young kids, their parents are putting them in these classes to teach them how to use their so-called supernatural abilities. I mean, that is super cool.
it's fascinating. I'm trying to think the best way to explain this. When you go on a journey in the physical world, it's subject to time and space. And say if you go on a train, unless you fall asleep, you've got a pretty constant picture. That's that story of that journey. But when we're turning to, say, this, call it the supernatural, that time and space element collapses, because in a meditation or something, or in a dream, you instantly go somewhere. Time is definitely illusory. The analogy being, if you're asleep and you knock something, you swing your arm out in your sleep and you knock something off a table, the sound of whatever falls and hits the ground is incorporated into that dream in that split second, and it actually has a history in the dream. Now, a lot of people will say things like, oh, it's just imagination. It's like, okay, if it's imagination, that nightmare that you had, why is your heart beating? Why are you sweating? Why is your body reacting in the same way as in this reality if that's not real? We are in a thing called today, and I've said before, it's 2 days. We are in a conscious dream and an unconscious dream when the body is asleep. We're walking in 2 worlds. One is in a physical avatar, one is without the physical avatar. We're not just the physical body, we've got more component parts than that. We've got the etheric, the astral, and the eye organization. I listened to a Neville Goddard lecture on Brian Scott channel last night, and I'm glad I did. I haven't listened to one of those for a few months, because he does repeat a lot. Neville Goddard in the lectures, he uses the same stories and adds new bits in, but it's good because it drives the message home, as it were. It's repetition. And Brian Scott put the question about what I don't understand, or can somebody explain what Neville means when he says everything is taken away, but there is no loss of identity? Well, again, it's this letting go. Certainly the material side, all the petty hates, all the petty likes, the expression being what is wisdom in the eyes of man is foolishness to God, comes into this. What you're taking away and back to the one that we are all a part of is the life story, the experience. That's what this is all about. So, but the rest of it is totally irrelevant. It's just background story. But it's the essence. That's the bit that is still individually us. This is what we take somewhere. I suppose I'm going to use the Jason Archaic's analogy that we're on a spaceship. We're going from one world to another world. We're at a holodeck and we're experiencing things. And you come out of it and you say, hey, I've done this and I've had the experience of this, and I can tell you about this and that, and maybe just practice runs to go on to a new world. I can neither deny or say yes, it's true, because there's a problem. It comes down to what your point of reference, which you have with a physical journey going from A to B. But when you start going into realms, I don't know if they're still within or without. I know that there is a sort of net in above on this dome. It's the reflection of the ley lines. It's the magnetic sky tracks that those things are up there on that are hidden, because they're hiding behind a distorted frequency. I've seen those. So I'm seeing within it. It's like, well, if we can't think our way out of a thinking box, at least we can think within the thinking box. And that's in astral travel meditation, but not thinking, but then being the observer and just observing what you're shown. There's that other area which I can only describe as black light, like black velvet, where there's this double tetrahedron, which is magenta with a white light in the middle of it. Now, again, I don't know if that's in or outside of this. There's also, I've seen this sort of ball. I would suggest it's 32, 64, or a multiple of one of those numbers of spikes on the outside of this ball. I think you've seen the image in the last 2 years used for something else. So we don't upset the senses. But I think most people listening to this will know exactly what I'm referring to. Since March 2020, that symbol has been shown a lot. But I feel that the glimpse I've seen is our consciousness from our real self that is put into a bodysuit that's probably still in the spiritual or still in non-physical, but then somehow comes into this realm, into the physical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely could be that way.
This is the
Whatever it
trouble.
is, it's just amazing how much power we have that we don't know about.
Well, this is the other thing. If we've got this countdown encoded in our DNA, which I feel we have, because I feel that the Great Pyramid of Giza is a representation of us. It has 3 chambers. The King's Chamber represents the pineal gland, the seat, the throne. The Queen's Chamber, I feel, is the heart. And then you've got the subterranean chamber, which is the gut, which is the sun. It's basically showing a Kundalini rising. Then you've got the star shafts, which were closed to the outside world. I feel that the white casing stones are replicating the enamel of teeth, because that is one of the last bits of a physical avatar that remains, and they often use teeth to identify people. So that shows that they are very hard wearing. So I feel that's why the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed in the way it was, and the color it is. Also, you've got the reflective quality of it will come into this as well, because the streams of spirit that are in tones and colors is another aspect. And interesting, the word aspect, excuse the pun.
Right, and the white garment, is talked about too in scriptures, that we'll get our white garment at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't put the 2 and 2 together, because this is the other thing, the cross comparison, which often reveals so much. When you hear it said in, say, a biblical language, and then you hear it said in a scientific language, and you can see that this is saying the same thing. It's like, oh, this is interesting, because it's funny how the older texts all are far more showing a coherent same story, but even those seem to be fragmented of a story, an original story. And in many ways, it seems that this is just an ongoing play out of that story on this world stage. I go very much with Neville Goddard in that there is only one character playing all the parts as well. It makes sense to me, it resonates with me. I have had similar experiences, not exactly the same as Neville, and I've even spoken to well, I say spoken to Neville, I found myself appearing in a very plush, I'd say sort of 5-star quality hotel, which could have been the 1950s, could have been 1960s, and there's Neville sitting there, and I think it's the New York Times, and he sort of folds the newspaper up or lowers the newspaper and sort of folds it. And before I've even had time to actually vocalize the question, as it were, in thought, he's already answered it. And it's basically yes, yes, carry on, and with a smile, and then I found myself back in this reality again, but that felt so real. I could feel the carpet, I could see the texture of the quality of the wallpaper and everything, the high ceilings, the ornate plaster, coving round the top, and the picture rails and things, the hotel staff going up and down in smart uniforms, and it's like, wow. I can't
Because
say
that's just as real as this reality. You know, dreams are just as real, and so are any other kind of out of body experiences.
that was conscious. That wasn't a dream, though. It's not when I've been lying down and then fallen asleep and experienced it. This was a conscious dream. So
That's
I
even
was,
better.
well, I was aware I was here. The physical part of me was here, but then I sort of detached from it, but still with a sort of like a bookmark to return to, as it were. Maybe it's like you leave a sort of like a ball of string to find your way back again. I don't know. Maybe if you don't have that, you don't come back in the body. It's not a conscious physical or a conscious thought process of, oh, I better leave a marker here so I know where I am or where I've got to come back to. That just seems to happen anyway. It's an interesting experience, but it's near impossible to distinguish the difference, except for that sort of awareness of there's an avatar that's sitting there somewhere, but you're in another place at the same time. It's incredible. But I'm now looking at upping the stakes on this one, and it seems to be working. I can't say anything at the moment. I've got but let's just say, like any device that's running several apps and they're open, plus the sort of downloads that are going on and things that are running in the background on devices, they draw more power, and then my ears got ringing like correct. The left one's got this real high pitched sound just started up. It knows what I'm going to say. The more power this thing is going to need to keep this distortion frequency in place. What happens when if there's an interruption in the magnetism and something falls off that sky track? This is something I'm working toward and testing, because it's like, well, there's things we can do in the micro, and can use this whole idea of magnification and multiplication and radiating out on a much higher strength. It works in the same way as Ken Wheeler talks about with the magnet, that the smaller the dielectric, the greater the magnetic field side of it. So I feel we do have phenomenal power to change this world. And imagine what we could do if there's many of us. It doesn't have to be that many. But to generate on the level I'm talking about here, that can change the sky this is something I think that is worth pursuing. I'm the sort of person that if there's a switch to press, I've got to press it just to see what's going to happen. So I acknowledge that part of me. It's like, well, if I find this metaphorical red button, I'm pressing it. I've done it within this avatar. So let's try it on the macro. This is fun.
Yeah, that's great. You have to experiment and try these things, and you've already seen so many things play out that most people would think are impossible, just the manifesting, how quick that goes. And that happens to me all the time too. You know, it just amazes me. I'll say something out loud about something I want to happen, bam, there it goes happening, you know. And so all this stuff, we just need to get versed in it. And yeah, we have the potential to do anything. Nothing's impossible. And if we can imagine it, we can do it.
Well, if through practice and getting better and better at it, and the things become more instant, wouldn't you say that would be called a shortening of days?
I guess you could look at it that way because,
Because
yeah, you don't have
it's
that time gap between, you know, for waiting.
yeah, it's fast forwarding in a way. It's funny because it works both ways. You're fast forwarding time, but the thing is coming to you quicker. So it's coming towards. You're sending out. It's coming towards, and it's becoming instantaneous. That's phenomenal. Oh boy, I'm having fun in this game. To some degree, I've got myself into a position where I am like an unknown quantity, a sort of free radical within the circuit. So I know I'm causing problems, shall we say, for the system. So
Well, Tom Campbell always says that once the system, you know, the large consciousness system, realizes that you're kind of paying attention, you want to, you know, communicate with it and whatnot, and you become a person of interest and you get a lot of response.
yeah, it definitely seems to be. I'm from the mortal perspective, I'm actually quite gobsmacked the way things are going. It's like, what are the chances of this? This is impossible. But clearly it's not. And so far so good. So I've got to take the next step into the unknown with this. And that's something that has been shown to me from both sides. I've observed people who you can see that they're lying to themselves. They are in relationships and things, they're unhappy. But then they put the objections, they rationalize it. Oh, the mortgage and the complications, who's going to have the kids, and all these things, which I can understand. But it then puts this barrier. And because it is, there's this fear of, oh, I don't want to be on my own. I need to be with someone. I need to be with somebody else. So I'd rather stay in an unhappy a loveless relationship than take the chance because I've got to step in.
And even you're in a toxic relationship often.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, I've had experiences of that. And I'm not saying I take 50% of the blame for it as well. Because I was an asshole. There's no two ways about it, I admit that. And probably very selfish. And I probably wouldn't have wanted to know the old me at all. But yeah, it's very much about embracing and stepping into that unknown. Yes, it's going to feel terrifying, but the more you do it, the terror falls away because it's self-proving. The more you do it, the more you see, what was I worrying about? That never happened. All those scenarios we create of, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? If you dissolve, you can get to a point where you can dissolve all those, and it's like, oh, as things are now, it's this. But I need to step there, and I need to not create all these illusory objections and just do it, and take that step. It's a leap of faith. This was something the conductor Sergio Salabadaka talks about with music. You have the concept of something, then it's a three-step process. You have a concept of something, and you understand the workings and the mechanics of it to some degree. Then you ask yourself, what would it be like if? How would I feel if? Then you get the final part is to step into it. Now, it doesn't matter what the external reality is telling you. So, as Neville Goddard would explain it, if you want to be a millionaire or be a millionaire, you start feeling it and you become it. Because he says there's no right or wrong in this reality. You can do anything you want. This is free will. But the guiding part of that must be that it comes from the heart. Because you can still do all this manifestation quite clearly from the way this whole system seems to operate, and you can do it that is self-serving in the material game, the short-term game, but there are no shortcuts like that. But in the spiritual and in the heart space, in the eternal, in the essence, that's where it has to come from. So yes, you could still have $1 million or whatever if you really wanted it, if you feel that you can do some good with it. But if that process to get there involves doing things at the expense of others, then no, that is not the right route. That's all it takes. It's that simple, really.
Yeah, so I need my $1 million just given to me so I don't have to take advantage of a lot of people. But yeah, and I look back, I've manifested so many things from early on, and it just really is how it works, and it really is, you come from that being level, the heart level, and that emotion behind it, and try not to come from that lack aspect either. You're already there. You put yourself there and you feel it, and before you know it, you really are there.
Well, a classic example of the system programming is the exploitation of male and female, and that sort of typical thing of where a woman will say to a man, "How do I look?" She's got a new outfit on or something. He says, "Yeah, you look fine," and she takes offence at that. And the communication is sort of that far apart, and this is what that sort of is highlighting what we need to do within ourselves, and that is to be honest with ourselves. It's like, well, this situation isn't working for me. It's not making me feel good. I'm staying in it to please others, but it's at my expense. There's no balance with that. So you have to sort of remove yourself from that environment, because that environment isn't going to change. You can't interfere with other people's free will. They've got to do that within themselves. So we're not here to save anybody. And what is being saved anyway? What if it is a simulation and a computer? Do you want to be saved and go through that same program scenario and play that all out again? I certainly would. because it also means I've wasted the experience. I've learned nothing, that I've got to go back and do it all again. I'd rather keep moving forward and don't be Lot's wife and look back and hold attachment to it, because I will become solidified as part of, and I will be saved as part of, like Lot's wife was sort of became a geological, very material, very solid part of that reality. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's historically true, whether it's just a metaphor, but it's the, what that story is showing is the key. And that's the thing with all of these things. It's too easy to get bogged down in the chronology of it, as it were, whether something's real or not real. But what really is real? Like the dreams and the things, they can seem very real. So I don't know the point of reference to sort of distinguish one from the other as such any longer.
Right. And even, mainstream science tells us that atoms are 99.99999% empty space, and everything's composed of atoms. So everything is 99.99999% empty space. So it tells you right there that nothing is real.
It's
everything tells you that.
It's amazing. You've got this thing called an alphabet. Now I can put those 26 characters in a particular order, and then it spells out something in English. I can use the same characters in different combinations and put it in Italian to say the same message. And likewise, I can say a sentence, and if I put punctuation in it, it changes the meaning of it. But there's also the frequency level. There's definitely more than one type of English. A lot of people point to legalese, but what about when we're talking language lessons of the heart English? Those that are speaking common English, the material interpretation of English, are not going to understand the spiritual English, as it were. Or they hear it in a very different way. So, I mean, if I was to go up to a Christian and say, I am the light, they're going to hear something that they're wrapped around a belief anyway and totally reject. So it's amazing how it comes down to language and communication as much as anything else between us and our avatar, our essence, and our constituent parts, and these physical bodies, and what the physical bodies are communicating, what we interpret from those nerve endings being pain. I mean, I was thinking about this with the moon meditations and things. When you write something you want to get rid of, and you write it down on a piece of paper, it may be worth setting fire to the bit of paper and holding on to it until you feel the heat, and then dropping it into the fire pit. So you reinforce the sensation. You felt a bit of heat, but you also felt it fade away again before it's done any harm to you. This is something that came to me when I was in the shower, because it's like running water, and it's spirit basically, and it's a water download from a shower head. And I thought, I've sort of done that without even consciously analyzing the whole process of it and what's actually being shown to me. But it's like, that's amazing, because that's another thing with Michael Harold talked about this, where you see the characters in the past and you fade them out. So it's another way of adding in a sort of a physical aspect to the same thing.
Yeah, and the emotional healing is so crucial on so many levels. If you really want to get in touch with your powers, that's the way to go, because it helps you lose the fear. Because that's key. You have to lose whatever fear you have to really get in touch with the powers that you do have.
Well, the clue is in the word emotion and how it's said. Because if I say it as emotion, because it gives more of a clue that it's an energy motion. When you're in stress, you're in choppy waters. You've rocked your own boat. You've rocked your vessel internally. You haven't got calm waters, because these are energy motions. And ideally, we want to be like that little wooden rowing boat on a perfectly still lake. So it's a mirror reflection of the mountain and the trees and the hills in the background, and the sky. It's perfect. You're seeing both. You're seeing both. You're seeing the reflected. You're seeing the physical, all in the mind, of course. But it's creating that stillness inside, and enjoying that sort of moment of being on that lake, and there's no storms. By all means, if you want to put a bit of breeze into it, and that's down to the imagination.
Right. And in our chat of 11 people, Liam was saying, isn't reality subjective anyway?
Well, I'm gonna sort of put the neck on the block and say yes, because I go very much with this art spirit. An art is subjective. What I mean by this is, go on YouTube and find the paintings by Robert Henry, American artist. I think he's about 1865 to 1930 something. And it works better at night for some reason, but you can do it with any one of his paintings, but his portraits especially. And just sit there with the picture. May take maybe 10 minutes. And you might get a sensation of, are my eyes playing tricks on me? Is that anime? There's some sort of story that seems to unfold in those pictures, and the things seem to move. It's incredible. And I can see why. It's Robert Henry is the ID that's attached to the EA. So it's the idea. He's the medium to express that idea from this art spirit. And in turn, his medium is the brushes, the oils, and the canvas. From nothing came something, and you've also got there was nothing made that was not first made, expressed there. Before it's become the idea to the individual artist, there's a seed that's come from somewhere, out of nothing. That thing that pops in your head, and you, with an artist or with a painter especially, they feel compelled. They've got to put that down on canvas and express it. It's something flowing through them. Same with musicians, same with songwriters and things. When people say about asking these bands what was the meaning behind this song, they don't really know. They probably don't know. They're not. It's not that they're in on the conspiracy. They are just a medium of a spirit, something that's unseen, that is guiding humanity through art, through the art. So yes, art is subjective. Another example of this, I would say, is we've all got, say, favorite channels. Some presenters you may not like you may see their accent or the way they look or the way they talk as an obstacle, which I feel it's like, well, you need to go back inside yourself and say, why is that being, am I putting this objection up instead of just hearing what they're saying and evaluating whether it resonates with me. But we all have these like subsets, and that's subjective. You could say that, but I mean, some people may look at a channel and say, oh, they're definitely a paid shill, or they're this, or they're that, or they're enlightened, or whatever. Again, it's subjective. I don't normally do this, but I am going to do this. There's that channel called You've Been Roasted, and I did look at the channel, and I'm not going to say anything negative, but clearly from what she said about Jason of Archaic, she's not really listened or understood anything to make her response video. And her showing of her computer screen, I don't know if that's a screenshot that she saved. I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, well, she could have saved a screenshot, and what she's showing on the screen was on the computer, but she's saying it, she hasn't deleted her comment. Don't forget there's the algorithms, and it's being played by the owners of YouTube and whatever, because you've got division going on there, which is rather silly. And I think there's more deep-rooted things that that particular person needs to ask themselves about themselves. Oh, my claws are out. But they're not really. It's not meant with an ill intent at all. It just seems so destructive when clearly there is something far more at stake, something very, very beautiful and magical to be found.
Yeah, there's not only messages in art, there's code and messages and everything, you know. Even if you just watch nature, you'll get messages, you'll get codes, you know. It's like something wants us to figure out what's going on, you know, to definitely realize we're more than just, you know, meat suits walking around waiting to die, you know. So yeah, the messages are everywhere.
Yeah, that seems a very desolate feeling to think, oh, you're just born, you go through life collecting things, and you sort of start downsizing, and then that's it, and you're either burnt or put in the ground, and it's like, well, that's a horrible thing. But from the things I've experienced that can't be rationalized, I can't accept that. I can chuck up that whole idea, that atheistic, materialistic concept out. That's in room 101, as it were, jettisoned. I'd be lying to myself if I dismissed all the things I've experienced. It doesn't mean they're all fantastically phenomenal. It can be sometimes the tiniest little things, and it's often the tiniest little things that give the greatest pleasure. Like the one that's just popped back into my mind is the sort of 2-year-old who's sort of smiling and waving at me from the buggy as her mother's sort of pushing her past, and that was a magical moment. That sort of interaction and sort of non-verbal communication. It was like, all I say is it seems like with adults, 1 in 10 have these oyster pearls inside them, but with young children, 9 out of 10 have this oyster pearl inside them that is like a very bright light that's not been programmed out of them at that stage. And obviously it's varying degrees of intensity of light between different people. Everybody is definitely different. individualized.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too if maybe like everybody starts out where they can resonate to be an immortal being, but some resonate out into being NPCs or the Walking Dead. Because you said children just seem so in touch, and the majority of them do, you know?
It's the way, um, from especially with young babies, when their eyes are open, their eyes are sort of like absorbing everything that they can see. It's a look that adults don't have, or very rarely. I suppose you could. It's described as having that light in the eyes. But I can't think of many young children that I've come across that don't have that look in their eyes. It seems to be very subdued or switched off when they start going to school. But then you've got,
Maybe it's like up until they're 7 years old, like, they always have that saying, give me the child until it's 7 years old. I'll show you the man. So
yeah,
maybe that's what all happens in that first 7 years. But it's interesting because it does seem like so many children would definitely turn out to be errants, that something
yeah,
happens in between where they lose that ability. And maybe, whatever immortal personality or soul that was in them left and went into another avatar or something. I don't know how that would work.
you've got the genetic bio part of the avatar, which is created from two avatars. And that and the environment that that newborn child comes into is going to depend how fertile that soil is that spirit is in. Is it getting stimulus, and what type of stimulus is it getting from its immediate surroundings, which is going to be its parents or a parent, and then others within that come into that circle, maybe uncles and aunts, neighbours, friends of the parent or guardian, as it were. So that's going to have an effect. And but with some children, they're probably classed as the problem children, um, the ones that are going to stubbornly hang on to that inner core of themselves and know that something ain't right. um, how far they then go with that and how far they question that later in life, it's holding on to that terrible twos of that keep asking why all the time and never losing that, because as soon as we stop asking why, we become static. We're no longer moving. But it seems to be with the asking why is the nutrients to keep the soil fertile, that desire to find out. And it is really, when it comes down to it, it's a discovery of oneself, because it comes down to the answers are all within each of us, and it comes down to have we developed the ability to communicate with our inner self or higher self, or whichever way you want to look at it. It's as much as anything else, it's visualize and feeling that your thoughts are not coming from the head, they're coming from the heart. And the brain does have a cellular structure like the brain, it does have its own brain. That's scientifically proven. That's not just wishful thinking or a speculation. That has been shown to be true.
Yep, that's pretty crazy. The brain has a brain.
We're more, well, the other, and of course the other one, your third chamber within your Great Pyramid of Giza, your avatar, your living pyramid, as it were. You've got the gut, which is the guide. That's the sun, the power, and the wisdom. That's the thing that guides you, that gives you the sensations where adrenaline will start coming up. You'll feel a sort of an anxiety, a sort of a warning that you're in danger, for example. You'll walk into a room and you'll sense there's an atmosphere because there's been an argument. You'll walk into somewhere and sense joy, and all the emotion, and there's nothing verbal. It's all in feeling, and it's the gut is knows which is right and which is wrong. The problem we have is communicating with ourselves. And how many people say, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen. I knew I should have listened to my first thought." That's a saying I've heard many people say. Or they say, "I knew it." It's like, well, if you knew it, why didn't you go with that feeling that was guiding you? I mean,
Right.
to
We've
me,
all had that knew it moment. We've all had that.
I'm going to offer as a personal testimony proof with this. I spent something like 13 years doing family history research. And the first instance was always following up on hunches, on feelings. And then, as much as I could, confirming it with the paper trail, looking at the original registers, the baptisms, the burials, the marriages, census records, and anything else I could find. And even the process of finding the other information, again, started with hunches and going out into the environment where the ancestors were, getting a feeling for what, because I'm looking at the same hills that they would have looked at, pretty much. The landscape hasn't changed dramatically that much in 150, 200 years or so. So you can get a feel in that way. And then you can get with that churchyard where I've got between 4th and 10th great grandparents are buried there, unmarked graves, but there is a feeling of those avatars and there is a communication. And I had some very strange supernatural experiences. So I know that this is true from experience. Doesn't matter if anybody else believes me, but I can use my free will if somebody says that they've been abducted by an alien and a UFO, and I can choose to believe or not believe. I can listen to what they're saying and gauge it from that. But I feel also now, post equinox, that the ability to see auras and things through electronic devices is incredible. That is going to add a new perception and probably answer the question that you've been roasted, Channel raises with, because she says, "I've got no proof. I can't prove it one way or the other." Well, we want to manifest something. We go to the spiritual. We go to the feeling. So it's quite clear to me that the spiritual, the thing that the next element that goes beyond the gas state to the spirit state, can unlock things in the physical and can confirm and prove one way or the other what people may be speculating on. This could be very interesting. It could even go as far as you could then look at mainstream media and the news, and you could probably hear and see things in a very different way, more so than even now. Oh, this is fun.
It goes back to everything is subjective, it's all perception,
Yeah,
and everybody sees things in a different way, sees a different thing, even.
definitely. There's also the waiting game, because we're in a realm that is subject to time. So I don't feel you need to even do anything. Um, and the things will be revealed. Those that, of course, will reveal themselves in time anyway. There come a point where, say, for example, they've gone down the ego route. That will become very apparent that they're wanting the attention or maybe the financial gain. I don't know, because there is that ego trap with all of this. Because as soon as you go on a public platform, you're stepping into public limelight, and it can be it's an experience to then start being pulled down that route, and it's one that's definitely one to watch, because it can this thing is very sneaky, this aspect, that this sort of lower eye consciousness side of ourselves that tries to push us down these routes. But this is something else I find interesting. I'm going to go with just the literal story of the Garden of Eden and the serpent. Well, on the one hand, it's like, well, God created everything, so therefore, even the serpent must be created by God. It is an aspect of, and it's there for a purpose. Same as within us, we have that little demon on one shoulder and the angel on the other, and the one will try and masquerade as the other and be whispering in our ears, and those things that come out as, I want this, I want that. But it's a necessary process to go through. Without that Luciferic principle, you'd just be a robot in a garden. You wouldn't have free will. You wouldn't be able to learn from the experience and be able to distinguish the good from the bad, as it were. So it's a necessary principle. So it's a necessary aspect of ourselves to embrace, but to not let take control, because that's what it wants to do. It wants to convince you that you are the physical avatar. It wants to tempt you with all the material gains. It is, in the Bible, it is, I think it's expressed as Satan takes Jesus to the highest point and says, all this can be yours. It's an allegorical story that's going on with inside us. It's that little voice that's trying to lead us down some what seems to be non-beneficial routes, but ultimately they are the most beneficial, because we learn best from the mistakes. If you fall down when you try and walk and you graze your knee, that reminds you to be more careful the way you walk. You learn from the experience, and in the end you master it. So I see all this whole Satan, Lucifer, evil, demon nonsense thing as we've all got a miniature version of that to come to terms with and make friends with. And that painting I posted up on Facebook called Fallen Angel, all I say is just look in the eyes. That, I think, is...
Nietzsche in the chat was saying, who is it that has the ego?
That, I feel, is part of the program that's put into the brain the part of us that is developed, because babies don't come into the world with this. It's something you sort of learn to develop as you get into the toddler stages, and then you want normally it's sort of brightly coloured toys and things, and sweet and chocolate bars, because that's why they're brightly coloured. They're made to look attractive, like jelly beans. So you've got this mortal temptation program that's put in as, the way I'd liken it is, you've got a computer game and you've got a booklet with it, and that's part of the explaining the object of the game. You've got to overcome that side of it. Hopefully does that answer the question, do you think? Or
yeah, you basically have the ego, which is more in line with your intellect, and then you have your being level that's in line with your heart, you know. So if you do things from the being level, there's really no ego in there. And ego is what makes us get upset or angry or hurt, all those things, because if we're just here being love and holding space and trying to be in service of others, then we won't take things personal when people do things that we think are unfair toward us, you know, because we're ultimately the creators of our reality. So it really doesn't matter if anybody treats us unfairly, because we can make our life whatever it needs to be. So that's irrelevant. But our ego comes in there and starts putting all these negative emotions into our system.
yeah, I was just thinking, you sort of, you said ego, and I thought that's exactly what it is. E is energy, and so where's it gone? It's gone. It does go. It's wasted energy. I think a perfect example of this is when you see a young child in a buggy and they're having a real temper tantrum. The rest of the world is still going on around them, but they're upset, but nobody's paying any attention. And that's a waste of energy. That's a child's frustration expression. But
And most
when
of
that,
us do that into adulthood. You know, we get angry or upset or whatever over someone else's behavior, actions, or even something they said, or even the news. You know, it's like the world's still going on around us. You know, we're just causing all this misevil, totally messing up our resonance for all the magic that we're capable of over what, you know? So silly.
yeah, I think also that can be turned into a positive as well by saving it up, and then maybe find yourself a sort of quiet place with a few pillows and things, and just scream, and obviously if you've got family or neighbors, say, look, if you hear me screaming, I'm not being attacked, I'm just letting out frustration, and let it go. Don't hold it in. That's the worst thing you can do. So yeah, do have a sort of tantrum, as it were, but in a very controlled way, so it is a release rather than a waste of energy. Because there seems to be that, because we're in a realm of duality, you've got dual ways of doing things. You can do things in a beneficial way, and in this particular case it's of benefit to yourself, or it's not of benefit to yourself if you're just having a temper tantrum and screaming and getting very red in the face and crying, and it's not achieving anything apart from you just got yourself into a state. But if you're doing it with the intention of releasing it, that becomes something different because you're letting it go. There's that theme again.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Is you can observe whatever the behavior is and just kind of let it go, release it, and you can choose to put the emotion in there or not. You don't even have to go through that negative emotion necessarily. After a while, you just get better at that kind of thing where, they say rule number one, don't sweat the small stuff, and rule number two, it's all small stuff.
That's very true. Yeah, that's good. Just trying to think now. But I'm just sort of being a medium really, because I mean there was no structure to today what we're going to talk about, and it just sort of comes. So my mind's sort of like blank again at the moment.
All good. We've been on here about an hour and 20 minutes, so I think we've covered some good stuff. We mostly focused on basically the so-called supernatural abilities that we have that we're capable of, and manifesting being one of those. So I think there's some good information here. And here, Jeff T in our chat has the question. He wants to know our thoughts on non-duality.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Non-duality.
Are our thoughts non-duality? Is that the question?
No, what are your thoughts on non-duality versus duality? Non-duality.
Both. I see that if we've come from one and we're individualized, we are both everything and yet we are nothing. I feel that duality it may be something that is just in this realm. It may be that the duality is here because it's a diagnostic zone. It could just be contrasts to distinguish things. For example, solid objects have the contrast of space as well as their shape and color, so we can distinguish one thing from another. I don't know if that answers it. It's such a hard one to even answer because it's trying to describe something that's outside, as it were, or something that we are within. But I'd say it's singularity and duality all in one. Maybe that's what the pyramid also shows, because you've got two and one, whether you have like a pyramid, so it's an upward one or a downward one. But there again, when you put the two together base to base, you've basically got a diamond. The thing that I saw, that double tetrahedron is pretty much like it's not a base to base pyramid, they overlap, so at some angles it looks like a hexagram, but it's one, but it's two as well. I can't say it's either one or the other. I think it seems to be both.
Yeah, I think we almost have to have duality because it's binary. This reality is on, off, 0, 1, male, female, black, white, light, dark. If you don't have that contrast, I think that really limits experience, I would think.
Yeah. Well, you only got to look at the power on and off symbol on any device. It's a circle that's broken with a line, so it's a 1 and a 0, or a 0 and a 1.
Right, and that guy was saying that consciousness that let's see, I took some notes from that guy's talk, but yeah, the contrast, the duality is part of the experience, you know, and I think it's almost needed to really run things, you know, if it's all just one. That's the whole thing about this experience, is fractaling off into smaller segments to have all these different experiences for the whole. And yeah, this guy says that the with the platonic computer, which he says is, you know, controlling the simulation that we're in, manifested meta consciousness is on, and unmanifested meta consciousness is the off part of the binary. And I thought his premise was pretty cool too, because he's like, just because we can't tangibly see something like, you know, a computer outside this realm that's controlling the simulation doesn't mean it's not there, because we can't tangibly see numbers, right? And he talks about one trips over the number two, but numbers are very useful and very important for everything in this reality.
Yeah, that was a very good point. I forgot about that. I was thinking as well, people have talked sort of in the UFO community side of things about living metal and consciousness being in these UFOs and things. I mean, what's to say that our understanding of what a computer or a simulation or a platonic computer really is? It seems that there's something greater and more, that it is clearly got a knowledge or an existence or a reality that is very different from what we've got here. So anything's possible with this, I feel.
No doubt about that. And I like that another quote, and I'll put this video in the description that when this goes on YouTube. This guy who talks about simulation theory. He's a Chinese guy, or he might be Japanese. He's pretty interesting. But he says,
Yeah,
if something's unknowable, then what we think it is can't be true because it's unknowable. So if we try to think it's something, if it's truly unknowable, we can't ever think of what it really is because it's unknowable.
this is this is like trying to describe God in physical measurements, quantifying things that cannot be quantified, isn't it? It's trying to envelope and put parameters around time, when it's like saying time is everything is eternal, but you're trying to put an edge to it. Because it's funny how with science, oh, space is forever expanding, and I'm supposed to accept that, which is impossible for the human brain to comprehend, because everything that in this physical world we come in contact with, regardless of size, has an edge to it that we can either see or we can conceptualize. We're being asked to accept something that is infinite from a science perspective, but then we're not allowed to accept it from a creator perspective. That seems sort of a bit hypocritical in a way, that oh, you got the system saying this is right, that's wrong.
Right, and it's obvious that science doesn't have a clue, although it's starting to get it. And quantum physics is shaking everything up. And this guy's, he's like, yeah, everything's explained because it was programmed in. So you don't have to worry about the science on the mechanics of how spooky action at a distance works, or also known as quantum entanglement, or how you know, the observer effect and the double slit experiment, because it's all just programmed in. And
Yeah,
I like he says that you have to that you can only see what is not when you're thinking about the infinite. I mean, and he says that metaconsciousness is the power to conceive, perceive, and be self-aware.
this is only a personal opinion, but to me, the incomplete finale of Bruckner's Ninth Symphony, which has been, it's an interesting term, realized by various musicologists with their input. Some of them have spent a lifetime studying Bruckner's compositional techniques and things, and it can always be argued that it's not authentic, it's not the hand of the composer, but there's something like 600 out of a potential 705 bars that do exist. And to me, that finale is the closest that I could offer as a way of describing the creator in sound. But that is only a personal opinion based on what I feel in that music. There's somebody else that they probably say, no, it doesn't work for me, but it doesn't make it right or wrong either. But yeah, that to me, that's the closest that anybody has ever come to trying to describe it. I don't think it's ever possible to really do. And I feel that's also why it wasn't completed, because we're not meant to know.
Right.
I like,
Also Ben's description on Vat City.
yes, yeah.
But yeah, you can never really know, because if it's unknowable, you can't ever know it.
Well, this is this is again my interpretation. I feel this is why in recent years you've had various musicologists try and complete this finale. It keeps the thing alive by the fact that it isn't complete. But I also feel there's another level to this, that those missing pages are out there somewhere. I agree with Nicholas Arnoncourt, the conductor. He put out an appeal in a live concert. He plays the bits that can be played that are authentically Bruckner. And he says, if anybody, search your archives, search whatever, they do exist somewhere. It would be fantastic to have it complete in a way, but in some ways that would destroy the beauty of allowing that art spirit to come through other individuals. And it actually creates a tree of life. You've got alternative endings to this symphony. I find that really beautiful, seeing it in that way, rather than having a definite closure. You still get a closure with music, and you still get 4 movements, but you've got a choice of which ending, whether you prefer them, or you don't have to have that finale at all. You can say, I'll stick with just the 3 existing movements that are complete. It doesn't make it any less right or wrong. It doesn't invalidate one or the other. And I feel that in art as well is the great diffuser of argument. If we can all agree that it is subjective, and it is all just personal opinions and things, personal perspective. It brings, again, it's a bit of a pun in a way, it brings harmony to things, especially with music. You've got harmony in music anyway, but you can also have harmony of colors in paintings by the blending of the colors in certain ways.
And really, life is the same way. You know, it's subjective. It's how you see it. And
Yeah.
that goes back to Liam's question earlier. It really is, because life is art. It is art. All the world is a stage. You know, that's totally true. And you have such a huge part. You're the center. You're the centerpiece. You're the the main attraction. So we all need to start acting like it, own our magic. And I think we're learning that. And that was another thing cool in this video, how, you know, they have these places, you know, point out, and I know they're all over the world. I know about some in Germany where parents send their kids to work on their supernatural abilities. So just imagine when those kids grow up, the abilities that they'll have. And then you got savant syndrome and autism and all that, and how much more tapped in those people are because their filters that are the central nervous system aren't as effective. So yeah, it's just a really cool time, and more people that gain their magic, that just sends that resonance out in the ether, which makes it easier for other people to fall into. Just like when world records get broke in athletics, you know, then other people can break it easy. So same thing goes with this kind of stuff. So we're definitely in a really big moment in time, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Sorry. Tail end of this cold. Get my thoughts back here. The mind's gone blank again.
Jeff was saying, how does free will work with non-duality? So
free will work with non.
I guess it makes duality, right?
Yeah. There would have to be for there to be singularity, it would have to create duality for free will. To me, it's sort of like the Garden of Eden. This is symbolically what that apple shows, the toroidal field. You've got the central core, and then the energy can go one way or the other, as it were. But then it folds back in on itself. So yeah, it's a bit of a question. Yeah, I think
you need to ask Ken Wheeler that question.
well, I think it's the dialectic and magnetism. You've got that center parts, which is one, but then manifests in two polarities. But then it goes back into itself again. So it's a continuous cycle. So it becomes like a figure of eight as well.
Got distracted by my dogs over here.
It's okay. I was just thinking Analema is like the figure of eight, and then I'm thinking Anuna. It's funny how these things always start with AN.
That's my middle name, Anna, with two N's. N-N-A. So I know that I'm part of Nuna. It's in my name. But yeah, none of that really matters in the big picture. The big picture is we're here to learn and grow and experience and own our existence here and our little reality, and just enjoy and observe and have fun and help others.
Yeah, a lot of it to make it easier on the self is letting go of identities. So I don't identify as being a particular nationality. I don't identify with anything, any political party. I don't identify with any religion. So the less attachment and belief you have in particular things, the less you're affected when somebody criticizes it. It has no power. If someone says, "Oh, that's evil," it's like, well, that's just your opinion. But it's not going to trigger anything that I feel I need to defend it either.
Like that's the whole ego thing coming in again.
Yeah. So, but I feel the less you identify with and you keep things fluid and remain open. Well, it's like this big question is, are we in a simulation? And if, and, or are we not? And what is beyond? But we can't see from the outside to look into it. We're trying to see it from being within whatever it is and trying to describe it in ways that we know, in a language that we know, which is pretty self-defeating.
Really, just really figuring out how it all works and how we fit in and what abilities and powers that we have. That's enough. And the rest, like anything that says what happens outside of this realm, no one really knows for sure, but most of us kind of resonate toward what we think, and we have our intuition, and some of us have some experiences. But whether we're with headsets on, flying in a spaceship looking for a new planet, or we're just some ethereal beings outside of this realm. Again, it doesn't really matter at this point. We just need to focus on, hey, what can we do here? What do we get to do with all this? It's like, look at all this cool stuff we have to play with and experiment with. What are we going to do with it? What's next?
I mean, I've got no problem with some of the material things and like music. So therefore, either black vinyl or compact discs or whatever. I wouldn't want to go completely down the route of, oh, anything man-made we'll get rid of and we'll go back to like a primitive state. One of the parts of this reality seems to be to make things as easy for ourselves. So for example, if you want to move something from one place to another, you come up with a way of transporting it. So maybe the invention of the wheel and the cart, and then, oh, there's a horse that's got strength, I can put that to pull it in front of it, pull it. Rather than trying to drag it ourselves. So there's that sort of inbuilt sort of thing to sort of solve ways of doing things, so we're not having to create it or waste energy on doing things, as it were. So there seems a purpose to it, but it's finding that harmonious balance with nature, if that's possible.
Right, and everything comes from nature ultimately. I mean, everything, even plastic comes from nature, the chemicals, it's all from nature. And yeah, we can create in whichever direction we want. And I think when the overall atmosphere and ambience changes, we get even more creative potential or different creative potential. But even in where we are now, I don't think we tapped into what we're capable of and what we have here.
Yeah, this is still the very early stages. I feel over this next couple of years, there will be some huge increases in the supernatural side of it, as it were, in what we are capable of, that maybe just don't seem possible at the moment. But half of it is, it's not whether it's possible or not, it's trying to rationalize how something has come about from something else. Because how does something come from thought and become into a physical manifestation? I can't explain that. I can take a stab at it, as it were, that it's.
But that's how every physical manifestation starts.
Yeah.
Everything starts with a thought. So sometimes you don't have to go through all the steps.
Well, I feel this whole thing with frequencies is another bit. I mean, you've already got a situation where you can speak the same language as another person, but they just don't hear what you're saying. You can point things out and they still don't hear it. So just by tweaking that frequency that bit further, that's taking away something of the audible. Well, what about now taking away something of the visual aspect, or maybe increasing or decreasing the audible, so we actually ghost out of this reality. We are here, but we're on such a different vibration and frequency, which is probably going to be from strengthening up that aura that is around us. That we are our own savior, we are our own generator, and we create the world around us. We create our own protective bubble as well. So I feel that this will get to the point where we actually ghost out of this reality as it looks in the perspective of now, as it were, shall we say.
Yeah, and that'll be super cool. But yeah, that could totally possibly be what happened with some of these peoples that historically that's recorded that they just disappeared. So yeah, it's all about frequency, and there's all kinds of things going on around us that we don't pick up on. You know, the visible light spectrum is only 5% of the electromagnetic spectrum, and so yeah, that tells it all right there. And we all know there's disembodied beings and all kinds of energies all over the place, and people go in and out of different reality streams, whatever you want to call those, different realms, different dimensions. So yeah, we're just barely touching the tip of the iceberg here.
Well, funny as you were saying that, I'm seeing a picture in my mind of an old wooden ship. It's quite substantial in size, and there's many oars from like little cutouts down the side, a bit lower down. This is I can't think of a civilization as such. It's not a European medieval type ship, but it's probably more the sort of thing from the Mediterranean. But what I was just shown was the physical ship, which is part of this reality, stays here. But the crew of that ship seem to vanish, but they manifest somewhere else, and there is a manifestation of the ship. So that they don't find themselves not on a ship, they're still on a ship. They've just like jumped into another, on a different vibration, into another reality that like a copy of this one, almost identical. But the only difference is the physical ship of this reality can't cross through because it is solid material. But how it works with the physical body, thinking about that. But there again, we're electrical beings, so I suppose we certainly feel things in the physical, so the electrical vibrations probably just ghost out the physical being, and collectively you're on a ship, so you all recreate that ship somewhere else. It's funny, it was just a quick flash. I saw the ship, I saw the crew, then I saw them disappear, then I saw like the ship again, and I'm still seeing the solid ship, but then I'm seeing like another overlaid ship that's a hologram version of it. And then that ship and the crew disappear and just leave the physical ship here. That's quite amazing.
Yeah, that's super cool, and that's just an example of how we bring out each other's magic when we resonate in similar frequencies. And that, they always say if more than one person get together with intention, it magnifies it. And we need to start using this to our advantage, and like you said, just resonating into this much better world to live in. And we can improve it for everybody a little bit, and then especially for ourselves. But yeah, we need to start doing something with this, these abilities and the knowledge of these abilities. Everybody has the abilities, but it starts with having the knowledge of them.
Definitely.
But on that note, I need to take my dog soon. So.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, that's enough. I've got 77% battery on the phone.
How much do you have? 17?
77.
Oh, you're doing good.
Well, I mean, we had this just before this. I thought I had a shower and I thought it must be getting close to 3 o'clock. I'll just check my phone, and then just as I did that, you messaged, and because I was thinking, I'm sure you'll send me a link soon, and with that you're saying, am I about? And I thought, that's amazing. That's like instantaneous thoughts, and you've replied. And I thought, wow, this is seeing this happen, because this isn't the only time this has happened with across Messenger with people. It's like you think of them and then you hear from them. It's incredible the way this works. We're only just sort of on the very early stages of this, but this is phenomenal. It just shows what can be done.
Yeah, it's so awe-inspiring, just the little tidbits that we get to witness and experience, and you can just feel that there's so much more to it that we're just barely getting to, nibble on what's really available. So it's so exciting to explore that and figure out what we can.
Well, some people would say, oh, it's just coincidence, but the only coincidence I can see is the number of times I hear people say that's a coincidence, because clearly none of these things are coincidences. Where do you say, how many times does something have to happen before you think, hang on a minute, this isn't coincidence? It's happened 300, 400 times. Well, there comes a point where it's like, no way is this just coincidences. Things keep happening over and over again. It could be number sequences, it could be a thought, and then somebody messages you.
Right. There are no coincidences. It's just messages and codes and just path, showing you your path. You really pay attention. There's everything's communicating to you, whether it's animate or not. Yeah, just so many things. Like you said, you can see a business strike by with a message on their advertising that somehow speaks to you for something that day. It's just amazing how it goes, and how much how much of a sense of humor can be involved too in some of the messages you get and the codes you get.
Yeah, some of them are actually quite amusing. You end up laughing when you sort of see the things, and then you think, oh yeah. And I can't think of an example because it's one of those little ones that happens a lot. Right. This has been fun.
I hope you start feeling better. And
It's the last.
you always do, because basically what colds and whatever flus are is your body detoxing. So that's why you always feel so much better after you're on the other side of those, because your body is detoxed. So
Well,
the trick is to not get it so toxic again, and that's the tricky part.
well, this is the thing because I'm being more an observer of it rather than living in it. And oh, I'm ill. I've got a cold. I feel like shit. I'm not feeling that. I'm sitting back from it and thinking, oh, this is interesting. And it's like what I'm experiencing is something good. It's a clear out. It's like a spring clean, as it were, or a fall clean, as it were. So I'm seeing this as something good. I'm not. It's not like I'm in pain. I'm not suffering. It's just a little bit inconvenient, but I can live with it. It's not. I'm not letting it affect me. I'm just going with it.
That's
Ah,
my dog, Cosmo. What
you've
Cosmo?
been summoned. Isn't it funny
Yeah,
how dogs aren't supposed to perceive time, but they know when it's time to go out, and it's the same time every day.
right. And yeah, they really they they're up on it for sure. They give me a little bit of leadway, but yeah, they're pretty amazing. You talk about communicating and sending messages all the time.
That's fantastic.
But all right, James, that was a great talk. I appreciate you coming on here, and hopefully everybody got something out of this. And hope everybody has a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever they are. And to always remember to focus on what they want and help others if you can. And we'll talk to you next time. Ciao, ciao. Bye, James.